Well, not at the moment. Not at the moment. We got a couple.
Please subscribe, like, and share.
Hello, good morning, good day, good evening for whatever part of the world you're at. Welcome and thank you for tuning in to Ben Almeida Racing. Today we will talk about exhaust ports. Then I'll follow this up with a segment on Thrift-One Cleveland and plated cylinder heads and such. Now, I want to get this point across, hopefully, that we may improve our engine performance, be it for the street or racing. On the street, when you improve your efficiency, you get better gas mileage and power comes with the same time. I don't think you could gain inefficiency and gain power at the same time. Maybe on a fuel consumption standpoint, yes, but when you on the street aspect improve efficiency, you can go further and make as much power or even more than before. In racing, when you improve efficiency, you get better power. Hopefully you get more laps, more mile an hour for whatever racetrack you're running in. Well, and then sometimes there is the subject of fuel is thirsty. Bottom line, that's what racing is all about. You're not going to make the power if you don't feed it with fuel and the corresponding air in the proper ratios. So that would always be hand in hand. Now, lately I've done some work with a group of guys out here in Las Vegas, and when I did their RB26 or 25 Skyline engine, and I said to them, we will try to limit the exhaust flow, low lift flow. Okay, and they're scratching their head, and when we took it to the machine shop, you know, they were just like wondering. Even the machine shop, when I said, one angle on that exhaust, give me 3 angles on the intake, 2 angles on the valve, so that'll be equal to a 5-angle seat arrangement, valve seat arrangement. But I only want 145 on the exhaust. And the guy looks at me, why are you trying to do this? I said, I'm trying to dissuade low lift flow, and I'll explain why. Now, we're bordering on, it's hard to do these things because there'll always be naysayers, but the naysayers will say it won't work because they haven't tried it. Okay, that's the bottom line, guys. Like when I said before, you can put a 4250 stroke on a 351 factory race block. Oh, can't be done. No. Yeah, that guy's crazy, so forth, so on. It won't fit. It does. And I showed it to you here in some of these videos. And here we are again on a segment of dissuading low lift flow on a 4-valve, 2-valve, 3-valve. Look, the bottom, well, maybe not so much on the 3-valve, okay? Because the intake to exhaust ratio with 1 exhaust valve and 2 intake valves, you know, quite significant. Here we go. This is not easy, like I said. This is opening up minds. I'm not here to change your mind, but I'm here to inform, and hopefully we can all build a better engine for what we're trying to do for yourself personally, or for your business or racetrack, whatever it might be. There is no better teacher than the racetrack. Why? And I'll touch bases on that. Here we go. I'm boring. this group here in Las Vegas. I keep saying Los Angeles because I've been there for all my life, and I moved to Vegas here 3 years ago. Now, DR Garage. Okay, that's Daniel Miranda and Ron Ascension. Both of those guys are veterans, U.S. veterans, and I have, like I said before, I have so hard for these guys, and some other people from out of state. I'm working with them on their projects. They're basically bordering on a racing shop and doing a lot of standard repairs and maintenance. And I like this kind of guys because they're more broad in their spectrum. It's just not power per se, but good maintenance, good practice in repairing these things and keep the customers happy. Street or racing type of people. Now, when I dealt with them, and I did one cylinder head, one port, one intake, and one exhaust, and I gave it to Ron and Daniel there beside him. They're looking at it, and I pointed the critical parts of the port. I said, you don't have to put or take off vast amounts of aluminum in order to see an improvement. If you know the critical parts of the port where you should be paying attention to when you start to know how it's supposed to look, or whatever is in front of you, there are other aspects there that, just like when I showed with the plenum, how I was able to, when I first saw somebody take off their stock throttle body in the 4.6, I looked in there, I saw the bad design. How many people could discern that, or right off the bat said, I can improve that? Once you've taken that part of, how should I say this, not expertise, everybody's on a different level of ignorance. I am the same thing, I don't know everything, but having the aptitude and looking at some say, hey, I think we got to do something about that aspect of any engine design, port, otherwise. Now, when I did the heads for them, they have another car, well, they have two other cars with a similar setup, but now the cylinder head that I showed them, I did the intake, and I said, do this on exhaust. Then I said, one angle on the exhaust, and there it was, one angle on the exhaust. They put this thing together. Daniel and Ron fired up. Right off the get-go, they realized this thing's got throttle response. And then when they went to the dyno, they made good horsepower. And the key element of what they were able to analyze and realize is that this doggone thing, now it's revving real quick. Boost comes in so much faster. There's less turbo lag, and they're looking at the RPMs, it's climbing real fast. Still lower on the boost level than before. So let's backtrack again on another part of this whole scenario. When I went to the East Coast back then, at the invitation of Max Gregorich, he put forth his cylinder head. And these guys are hardcore sprint car, go-kart racers on the East Coast. And they showed me their single cylinder, basically a Honda cylinder head. And I looked at it sitting on the table, and right off the bat I said, always, and you've heard me before, even on my writings on Facebook, when you cannot discern from a distance who is the intake and who is the exhaust, you're in trouble. When you see the big, when they're so close to each other, and you're going, okay, that's the intake. That is a signal. Something's not right. And I told, Gage Motorsports, and I said, I think I have to put this on the flow bench and look at the numbers before I make a determination. But here we go. Max, when I went back here in Vegas, he gave me 2 cylinder heads and a cutout. In the process, I looked at the numbers, and again, I did some changes on the floor of the intake port and the way the angles are on the groove of the combustion chamber. And finally, I said, let's take that exhaust and put one angle and dissuade that from having a good low lift flow. What was the net result? Well, when they called me up, when they flow tested the cylinder head after the changes I've proposed and done to this thing, and I've made some more comments on what's the next move, he called me up and he said, Ben, you're flowing 10 CFM less than the best cylinder heads out there that we use in competition. I go, okay, so let's go to the dyno. Flow benches are tools. And what the flow bench will tell you, the bigger you make it, the better the numbers look. That could be throwing you in a different direction and end up screwing you in very many ways. Improvements are good, but the improvements, you got to be, should I say, aware. There's the point of diminishing returns, then you start going backwards, flow-wise. But the net result was 10 CFM less on the flow bench. Now he said, he called me a couple of days later and says, Ben, it's really crazy when we flow test heads and we eventually dyno, when you get 3-5% improvement, 6 to 8% improvement, usually 5, we will kill for that. That is a big jump, and that is true. I mean, today in Pro Stock, 1, 2%, 3%, oh boy, you're gonna dominate. And what they came up with after they tested all the changes, they went smaller the exhaust valve as per my recommendation. And he's still scratching his head over here, and because of this, you know, I mean, Max Gregorich and I became good friends, and we'd talk for a long time, long hours, or long minutes, or to an hour, always brainstorming about what we should come up with, or what his next project would be. And he would ask me what I thought, and the man is sharp enough, you know. I mean, I'll just throw up my opinion out there, then he'll go run away with it. It's either good or no good. So far, it's all been good. So that what we came up with is, or what they came up with after they dyno tested, it was 23% more power across the board. When you take a peak power and then you pick up the mid-range, that is the best thing in the world. 23%. And his people that he deals with over there are looking at him and says, hey, does this guy been doing cylinder heads for motorcycles all this? He goes, no, he's a V8 guy. He says that even in our world today, even on the V8 scene, or 4 or 6, whichever one you might happen to run, they improved the intake port, they improved the exhaust port. They improved the intake port again, and they improved the exhaust port again. Well, improve the intake port, stay with the exhaust port, and I will show you guys why. You cannot overdo this, and let me emphasize that clearly. When you do this, you start going backwards. And what Max Gregorich and DR Garage in Las Vegas, Danny and Ron, what they found out, or Daniel, not Danny, Daniel Miranda and Ron Asuncion, what they found out, Max Gregorich, is that when you do this reduction in low lift flow, there is a big dividend that's coming your way. These two guys experience it, and I would like some of you here willing to give it a shot to try it. Now, before we proceed with the diagram, I would like to look at if I missed anything here. Oh, therefore, with this new kind of thinking, there are people out there saying, oh, we have this calculation to get cam grinds, lobe separation, so forth and so on, and those are fine and dandy. They're great, but they don't apply for the new age cylinder head. What I'm saying is that SB2, the Yates, the Chrysler NASCAR heads that are out there since Chrysler got out of NASCAR, a lot of these engines filled up through the drag racing ranks and hot street cars. You cannot have the same mentality that you've done with a regular small block Chevy, small block Ford. Oh, it wants a 108, it wants a 110 is costing us power, we gotta go to a 106, 108. Sure, but you should make that mistake with this new cylinder heads, and I'll explain on this board later on what's going on. Cannot do that. Now, as far as the concept of somebody's cam calculation to give you the cam grind, lobe center, so forth, so on, overlap, sure, if that's what floats your boat, I am with it. But I'm trying to say here is that I'm not dissuading anybody from trying to that concept of calculating camshaft numbers. There's nobody better in the world of camshaft than the cam manufacturers themselves. I've dealt with Bill Godbold from Comp Cams. He sends me info something. Hey Ben, we have a new grind. You like to try it? So and so. Just let me know. Send me a text here or email, and then I'll send you this grind. And some of these grinds are not available for everybody because they're not about to give somebody who will get their cam grind and run it and blow their stud up and complain, oh, he gave us a bad product. So, no, they want somebody who's responsible. Same thing with Nolan Jamora and you know, at Isky, who's the main guy there. And you know, I've dealt with him for many years as well. Guy is sharp. Rod at Isky, he's another one that I talked to, more so in fact than Nolan. Nolan does an R&D. Rod at Isky sees a lot of these grinds that feedback from the customers. From Bill Godbold, some of his guys or most of their guys at Comp Cam, Nolan doing R&D, and then Rod talking to customers there, which I dealt with a lot of times. And there's no better feedback than dealing with dozens or perhaps hundreds of customers. Oh, you're running a Chevy or LS1, or you're running, he's seen it, they've seen it. They get the feedback. But if I can sit here and I do camshaft once in a while, I never grind them, but I just use them, these guys are way up there on top of the knowledge scale because they have the feedback that they refer to and they get back to them. Hey, that thing either works or doesn't work, or why don't we twist the lobe centers this way or whatever, and that's where they come up with a darn good grind. And I don't care, I'm not an expert on that, I just use them. But if you're going to give me a calculation, oh, this is my concept of doing, yes and no. Refer back to Godbold, Jamora, and Ron at Isky. These people I deal with, they can do you no wrong. They have your best interest at heart. So here we go with the whiteboard, and I'll explain. Okay, now we have the board here in front of us, and also you notice I just shaved myself in part 2 of these high-tech discussion. Anyway, it's all state of the mind. I cannot doggone explain anything or do anything without getting prepared mentally, physically. You know, I bet you some of you guys have your own little quirks and stuff. I would go to my shop And before I start working, I clean everything up. The table, put all the tools together and everything. Then when everything's set, then I open the cameras, mess them up again and start working. It's a state of mind. And everybody has their own little quirks and stuff. And some guys work, they got to blast the radio real loud. Or rather get their cup of coffee first or Starbucks before they get to work. I have to clean my whole area up. Then I start working. So, I mean, if I left it the day before, you know, messed up and everything, and I come in the morning, I clean everything up, then I start working again, bring the same old tools back out again. Wow, that's what you call little crazy stuff there. But anyway, here we have the whiteboard, all right? And let me also paraphrase here and stress a point that even though I do a lot of Fords, all these things here, and I've done a bunch of Chevy engines for the street and race, a lot of these applies just as well. So just don't think, oh, that's a Ford guy, it doesn't work with a Chevy. They do. Especially with the LS, which has a very close configuration to a Ford small block. And what I've always felt that whatever works for a small block Ford, stroker, so forth, whatever, will work on an LS just as good. Okay, let me put that in there. Now, we will talk about the exhaust port. Even though I have the intake here, because I cannot talk about the exhaust only without referencing off the intake, because it's all part of the whole view of how things work. Now, let's start with the old configuration. Ford and Chevy, same way here, and the early Chryslers, low port angle, intake and exhaust, and what we ended up then, our camshaft with lots of overlap. Why is that overlap necessary? Excuse me, because the exhaust flow coming out at a rapid pace when the valve opens up creates a low pressure while it's going downstream, excuse me, to the pipes. Now when both valves are open, the fast exiting exhaust column creates a low pressure right behind it. And when that intake valve opens up and this starts to close, it's reflected on the intake and it pulls it. It gives it a good yank, okay? And then this good yank is reflected from the exhaust column coming out to the intake and gets it a big pull. And like I've always stated in some of my prior videos, this overlap phase, which is the fifth cycle or the unknown cycle of a four-stroke engine, should have been called fifth-stroke engines or five-stroke engines, does more of the pulling than the piston itself. If you would rely on the piston to do the pulling, it's too late. But that's enough subject matter. We'll focus on this thing here. Now, old school camshaft. See this interrelation that when the exhaust column comes out, it gets a good yank on the intake. What it does is that when it comes in, it has to this dogleg bend. It's just a necessity. You have to have a long side that comes up like that, a short side that comes up like that, to somewhat equalize the differential in length. Just like when you have headers. Okay, when you have long tube headers, you notice how they try to make it equal length. That's all they're trying to do. Minimize the differences in the length of the area. Now, this is a lot longer than that, so you have to put some kind of bend. And it also helps the airflow negotiate the turn going down to have some activity on the short side of the intake port. Now, old camshaft, oh my God, super stock camshaft, I've seen them as low as 102, 104, 106, 108 on the intake center line, and some people say out there when you get to the 110, oh, you got to pay a penalty in the response, so forth, so on. That is true, that's correct. Because it needs a lot of help with the assistance of the exhaust, and it gets a good yank and go out. The problem with that, at low speed, there's a tendency to have reverse flow and it reverses back because this overlap is quite wide, all right, and they're open at a bigger amount of time. Both valves are open, and you have this column going in, and also a reverse at a lower speed to go back and contaminate the intake mixture. That's why you have all these crazy idle, you know, like they call the popcorn effect or the rumpety idle sound. That's actually a miss. There's nothing good about it. It's actually dilution, and this doggone cylinder actually misfires. All right, because it's getting some kind of EGR action at the same time. But people love it. I love it. I love the sound of a Cami engine. It's just the way it is. It's part of the attraction of hot rodding, the radical idle. Now, when you want to smooth down the idle, you minimize the overlap. That's why when you look at factory camshaft 118, 119, whatever, they hardly have any overlap. They have a clean idle because there's no cross-contamination going in or going out. All right? So here's the scenario. Lots of overlap. So when somebody says to you, oh, we have this cam, what's your calculus numbers, you divide, so and so on, squared, whatever, and you come up with a number for your lobe separation and all that. Oh yeah, that's great. It works, but not here. Now, the new cylinder head. You notice this port is standing up. This is basically a little lower horizontally. This is a little higher, or a lot higher, should I say. Now, what actually happens is the exhaust is also a lot higher. Now you can really see the point here. That once the overlap happens, this is a fast reacting intake port. It moves quickly because it doesn't have to climb up and come down. It moves quickly and boom, it goes in. And the exhaust, once it cracks open, it goes out. The flow is instantaneously, just about. It goes out real quick. These two scenarios compared to that is drastically different. Here, if you use the same amount of high overlap cam on this new configuration, you're going to have a lot of draw through. You will lose your dynamic compression. That's the compression that you catch inside the cylinder. That's the working compression. When it goes in, rapid, very high flowing exhaust of the low lift goes out, and you blow your column charge out to the pipe. You follow me? Okay, so here's a scenario that is detriment when you run a high overlap or an old school cam on a new age engine. You will have draw throughout. And what you're going to do is you're going to have a PK engine with hardly any mid-range or reduced mid-range power. It happens there as well when you have too much camshaft. But it's really, really very bad here. So what do? The old camshaft here, let me see, let me put here. They would go 104, 108 to perhaps 110. Over here, since you have such a quick, it doesn't have to pull here, go through the bend, come back, and come up through the exhaust port roof and try to bend down, especially the Cleveland Fords. It's more like a down kick. Oh, horrible. It comes up and dives down to clear the shock towers. So you have a bend coming up and then a bend again to exit out. Now, so you use a 104 intake center line, lots of overlap on the exhaust and intake relation. Here you have the lobe separation, and sometimes they say, oh, on the 110, it's gonna pay a penalty. But from my experience, maybe from you guys, you like the 108, 110. I usually like a 110 camshaft on the street or even some racetrack, okay? And we all have a tendency to overcam our engine. So if my intake centerline is on a 110, I advance it 4 degrees, ends up perhaps 106 intake centerline, but 110 grinded into the camshaft from the factory. Now, since here we have this issue about too much flow bypassing and going out the exhaust, guess where we ended up with here? 114.5 to as much as 118. Whoop. It's kind of hard to write when it's bored. 118.5 to as much as 119, and I've tried it. All without consequence. It all liked it. Because once you create that wide lobe separation, the overlap right here, okay? This is what happens. When you have a narrow, okay, lobe separation, you got a lot of overlap. When you increase their distance, your overlap, your point of intake and exhaust opening are significantly reduced, okay? So I ended up right now between 114 to 118. When I run a SC1, I run 118.5. When I run a C3L, which is quite not as high, it's almost like this, I run a 114.5. But when I get to the plated Brodix Neils and all that, SC1, I'm up there, I go 118. I separate them furthermore and overlap becomes less. Here is the scenario. It's starting to look like a turbo grind, isn't it? So when I had a 114, the guy goes to me before, some cam manufacturer or it's a shop that regrinds camshafts, and they go, well, you know, Ben, that's a turbo grind. I said, yeah. Well, why do you put a turbo grind on such a radical layout? I said, well, I don't have the time to explain to him this relation. I just said, it seemed to like it. And he was scratching his head. I like it. I think with such a radical concept, excuse me, radical cylinder head, you might be better off with a 110 or 109 or maybe 104. Really get a good yank. Yes, good yank. Maybe too much. Throw out to the pipe. Now, here's finally the subject matter we're talking about. Why do I need one angle on that? If you notice, the camshaft, if you notice, valves in the old days are huge, intake and exhaust. But now intake valves are getting larger, exhaust valves are getting smaller. Why? Because the port angle is less, requires a smaller valve. A bad port angle, low port, requires a bigger valve to create the same amount of flow. Now we will get to the root of our discussion. Anyway, here we go. You know, I don't read from a prepared, piece of paper. I read, some guys I see out there, they have like President Biden, reading off a teleprompter. I think I'm still too young to use a teleprompter. Anyway, okay, so here we go. Now, what is going on here? When I stated at this video, the start of this video, why we need to limit the flow and the after effects and why it is beneficial. Here we go. Let's just go down to the basics. When an exhaust valve opens, it's under a lot of pressure. Okay? That propels the exhaust to want to get out to the headers. Not only is that in partnership with pressure, is its main partner temperature. Heat is energy, like I've always stated. When you have pressure and heat, when you increase pressure, heat goes up. Okay, now you have pressure from combustion after effects and temperature from combustion effect. These two are very good propellants. So now once you crack open the exhaust valve, they will get out regardless. That's why the exhaust naturally is a smaller diameter than the intake valve. That said, I made the statement earlier, I want one angle on the exhaust to dissuade low lift flow. And many out there will say, but why did you do that? You know, if you don't have that nice 45, 65 or whatever 33 angle valve out of the exhaust, it's going to hurt you. Perhaps with the old school low port layout, where as soon as the valve opens up, you need as much help, because this one here, when it come up, it hit the roof and want to come dive down. Bad situation. Okay, so I agree, having a lot of exhaust flow low lift with the old school heads is good, beneficial to a certain point. Okay, on this, when you have good low lift flow by putting 3 angles or 5 angles, whatever you wanted to get out of that, guess what happened? As soon as that intake valve opens up, it's got a very big signal coming out of this thing from the rapidly exiting gases, creating a lot of negative pressure behind it. It'll take a good yank and goes out, blows out. The column charge blows out. Your dynamic compression drops because a lot of it went out the pipe. Very bad scenario. Therefore, I stress you run 145 or 52 in there on the exhaust. You see the reason is that I'm trying to dissuade low lift flow. It will flow regardless. With today's compression ratios of 14.5 to 1, low, to as much as 18.5 on a big block. We run 16.7, 16.5 on a small block, stroker or non-stroker, short stroke, long stroke. I run that much compression on gasoline. Go figure. If you take the low lift flow out of it, you won't hardly see any power loss. But like I said, it's under tremendous pressures and temperature. It will get out. It doesn't need it. But then they go, but what about what happened when you're closing? But that's exactly what the problem is. When that exhaust valve starts to close, here's a scenario that will mess you up. When the exhaust valve goes to maximum lift, the diameter is inconsequential. Or should I say, let us minimize the effect. Why? Because the initial maximum flow, pressure and temperature got out the moment you crack open the valve. Boom! They took off out of there. Right? When it gets to maximum lift, they're all left. All the exhaust gases has gotten out, the majority of them. So the diameter is not really that important. As long as it's not too small now. There's still a ratio you got to look at. But what I'm saying is that if you made this bigger than usual, you will have a lot more low lift flow, even with one angle. So you kind of minimize the diameter. At the same time, because maximum lift, it really doesn't matter anymore. Everything got out. But here's the next scenario coming up. When that exhaust valve starts to close, right? Piston rapidly coming up. The intake cracks open. Remember my statement, limit low lift flow. This is the low lift flow I'm looking at. not the one when it first opened up. I don't care about that. This is the consequence. When that exhaust valve starts to close and the intake valve starts to open at overlap, the excellent low lift flow, guess what it does? This is a fast reacting intake port. That's a fast reacting exhaust port. It already gotten out. This one comes in, sees that excellent 3-angle, 5-angle, or 3-angle valve job with nice 30, 40, 45, or 30 or 52 or whatever, to a 60, 65, whatever think it is necessary. That low lift flow issue will take the column charge and blow it out the exhaust. Net loss. Loss of dynamic compression. Oh, I have, after I did my calculation, I have this much dynamic compression, so I'm still good. Do you really? Could you really predict how much that good flow exhaust at low lift values took out of your equation? Could be significant, could be not, but why chance it? So what I'm saying is that when you put one angle here, the exhaust come out at the initial after combustion event, exhaust valve cranks open, it gets out, it will get out. It's under a lot of pressure. But when it finally starts to close, piston comes down from bottom dead center, starts to climb up rapidly, chasing the exhaust valve, the intake starts to open. If this exhaust flow isn't very good, by purpose, your column charge that gets yanked out from the signal from the low pressure exhaust port comes in, and when this is also sunk in, instead of coming in and going out the exhaust, okay, it go like that. Okay, from this aspect, you come in and go out the exhaust. If this smaller diameter and also farther in, the valve placement is a little sunken in, again to limit low lift flow. Not like if it's sitting on top of the chamber, but a little bit below the chamber or deeper into the chamber. During the overlap phase, the intake column comes in and goes under the valve. Instead of an excellent flowing exhaust valve, it'll go over the valve and out the exhaust. So when it's receded a little bit, it goes under, and then it's not an excellent flowing low lift flow exhaust port. It will go under instead of going out through the pipe. You gain power, you got mid-range, you got a more efficient engine. Now, what also happens there is the idle will be a lot better. It is a more cleaner idle. All right, that's gonna be. It's not gonna be as rumpity-tump. Not so far back, years ago, when I did Hewitt DeWitt's engine, I had the same exact concept. Not quite as advanced as today. With a 900 lift camshaft, or almost 900 lift camshaft, this doggone thing was idling at 800 RPM. And the guys were looking at the idle when he was idling, they go, this should be dying out. It should be stalling. That's 800 or 850. And they're scratching their head. They said the tack was wrong. No, it's not. I can get it that low. You notice the Pro Stock engines, when they come up to the line, they're like going, they're going, Warren Johnson, Bob Glidden, Rick Smith, all those guys. Perhaps they have the same thing. Back years ago. I found this out years ago as well. And when I finally realized it, I go, no wonder those Pro Stars are going pop, 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 pop. Low RPM and the idle is good. There it is, guys. All right? So when I say, when I limit low lift flow, you know, DR Garage in Vegas, Max Gregorich, when they realize what they're looking at, it made a believer out of them. I mean, you could probably apply the same concept, and as usual, like I said before, I had guys who I give advice to, and they'll follow it initially, then they put their own twist in it, and then the whole effect goes away. Stay with it. One angle there. Dissuade low lift flow. It doesn't matter at the start of the exhaust phase. Pressure and temperature will propel themselves out. I am concerned during the overlap phase when these two valves are open. What is that low lift flow actually doing? Drawing exhaust flow out. Now, before we close this out, in the same example, and I've done this where on the flow bench I put a tulip exhaust valve, and I go, wow, I picked up a lot of CFM on the exhaust valve, a lot of flow. It looks good on the flow bench. On the dyno, it didn't look too happy. On the racetrack, it slowed down. Why is that? Again, when you put a tulip valve, here's a standard valve, right? Like that. Oh, it looks like a flying saucer. Anyway, when you put a tulip, it goes like this, okay? What you're having there is you're putting a back angle into the port. What does that do? It picks up low lift flow again. Also, at the overlap phase, when there's a tendency to backtrack. Remember what I said before. You know, when you have a hard exhaust pulse, you go boom, boom, like on a lawnmower, boom, when you cover your exhaust port or that little teeny muffler on a short runner exhaust on a lawnmower, it goes, okay? You put your finger in it goes like this. Same thing here on the V8. When it blows out the exhaust, it wants to retract back or backflow almost immediately. Just like I said the example of that atomic test out here in Nevada where they had this big barn, and when the power of the nuclear blast shows up, it blasted the whole house, it laid it down, and then shortly after all the gas came up, it stood right back up again, but in pieces. That is, you know, reversion. Is, you know, reversion. Just a nuclear reversion, exhaust port reversion, same thing. Now, when you have this situation, what did you just do? Low lift flow helps, of course, come up. It doesn't create turbulence right here because of the abrupt angle that comes out. It may create some turbulence there. But as it go out, really nice, it loves it. But the problem with it backflows back into the intake, well, back into the exhaust port, exhaust valve. You give it a nice ramp to go back into the chamber and contaminate this bad guy here. Okay? So, again, the flow bench told you one thing. More flow, bigger port, bigger everything. But the reversion, negative consequence, showed its ugly head right here. And then again, it becomes heavier. This is why, when you look at an exhaust valve, let me cover this up. On some Pro Mod top fuel, Here's their lifter. There's the wheel. Okay? With a bigger exhaust valve, they have a tough time opening the exhaust valve during the exhaust phase. That's why you see someone run a steel rocker arm with an aluminum intake rocker arm. To top it off, besides breaking the rocker arm, they're breaking the lifter. So, a manufacturer out there put a wheel inside the lifter body to support the wheel that touches the cam lobe. Okay? So, you have this hidden here. You have the roller wheel, and then you have another wheel on top of it to give it support to try to open the exhaust valve. Top Fuel, funny car, some pro mods are doing that. Cannot open it. They break the lifter or they break the rocker arm. So you have a roller wheel on top of the one touching the cam lobe. And before I forgot, oh, last point. Today, our small block got 154 exhaust valve. Back then I ran a 1625, I ran a 174 on the Cleveland Fords. Now I'm down to 160, 158. I won't even be, I will try a 156 here soon enough and try to get a 227 intake valve, 228, to try to get myself more room, more intake valve room. Again, the pressure comes into play. Therefore, with a 156 or 157 exhaust valve, some nitrous head out there, a small block, got a 156, exhaust valve. Start to think, why is that so? Okay? Now, for my closing remarks, I said smaller exhaust valves. Big blocks today, Mountain Motors, IHRA, big block IHRA engines run a 180 to 182 exhaust valve. Mountain Motors run even larger than that, maybe a 184, 185 for those 800, 750 cubic inch IHRA mountain motors. Makes sense, right? But here's the telling time to bolster my case about smaller exhaust valve. How much power does a Top Fuel engine produce today? 8,000, 8,500? I even saw somebody said they're making about 11,000 horsepower on these Top Fuel Hemi engines. Guess how big their exhaust valve is? 192. Okay? When you look at those alcohol heads sold out there, the exhaust valve is 192. Now, some guys, perhaps, put a little larger than that. We never know. Because sometimes I get heads from somebody, I change the valve size. So, it won't be surprising if any of them go bigger on the exhaust valve. But how much bigger than 192? Not that much, I bet you. I bet you probably not even 194. Definitely not 2-inch, because they're not going to open it. So, in closing, if the majority of Top Fuel 8,000 horsepower engines get by with a 192 exhaust valve, then what are you doing with a big exhaust valve on your engine? You're making 1,000 horsepower, you're making 950 NA, or you're making 600, 750 with a 160. There's not that much farther away from a 190, which supports 8,000 plus horsepower. I bet you, when you look at others, they got too much exhaust valve. So coming down to Max Gregorich from Gage Motorsport, and Ron and Daniel from the Art Garage in Las Vegas. These guys followed it and saw the results. I've been quiet about it for many years, and I would like some of you guys to keep an open mind here. Just think Top Fuel 8,000 horsepower 192 exhaust valve. So I bet you, even on your 4V, which is even worse, 4V heads, 4 valve heads, you need to limit that exhaust. In fact, one manufacturer's racing, should say group, or a racing entity of a manufacturer called me up one day, asking me questions, and I go, what do you think, Ben, of our 4 valve heads? I said, exhaust valve too big. And he goes, huh? Really? I said, and we talked for about over an hour. And I said, this is what's going on. And he was like, quiet. We got to bring you here one day. I said, okay. If we can get the requisition, a budget, we'll bring you in. And we'll talk about this. I said, well, just go ahead. You guys got all the facilities. You got all the resources to do this. Try a smaller exhaust valve and let me know how fast your engine actually picked up power, response, mid-range, economy, so forth and so on. Okay? Because all these things are mostly selling point. 5 valve. What's next? 6 valve? 8 valve? Come on. All right? That 5 valve? No. All right? Definitely. So you're going to have 4 intake valve and 4 exhaust valve. It's not going to happen. Anyway, please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll keep this discussion going in this direction. All right? And I'm going to be doing some more build-up, 900 horsepower small block Ford build-up. Okay? And doing all this other one. I'm just lagging all behind. And I guess my health not that good, but hopefully it gets better. I'm all drugged up. Good stuff though. All right? Thank you guys. Good morning, good day, good evening. Bye.